It's a twice a week show where we talk about movies from our list of shame or our list of movie blind spots. I'm Adam.
I'm Andy.
And earlier in the week, we reviewed, what did we review? Magnificent Seven, which is a remake or Americanized version of The Seven Samurai. And we wanted to follow that up with another movie that's based off The Seven Samurai. And that movie's going to be
Battle Beyond the Stars.
Roger Corman's Battle Beyond the Stars. Let's get into that.
Unless I can bring back a fighting force and offer some resistance, we're finished. You think your father will help?
My father isn't the way he was when your friend Zed knew him. You'll see.
As long as he gives us the weapons.
We're here. You go on alone. It's Father's wish.
All righty. So you had never seen The Magnificent Seven.
I've never seen The Magnificent
You've
Seven.
never seen Battle Beyond the Stars.
Never seen Battle Beyond the Stars.
I actually had also not seen Battle Beyond the Stars. So it's a new movie to both of us. Well, so this is a movie that came out in 1980.
Yes.
And before I kind of break...
Post-Star Wars.
Post-Star Wars. Before I kind of break down the plot and we discuss how we feel, I want to say that I actually had a lot of friends that were familiar with this movie. But I never was I never heard of this movie when I was a kid. I'm older. So I was alive in 1980, but I didn't watch this movie in 1980. I'd never heard of it, but I remember somewhere around the late 90s, early 2000s, I was with a group of friends, like 4 or 5 friends. Yeah. They all had not only knew about this movie, but had seen this movie. Okay. And I was like, "What the hell are you guys talking?" And I mean, I'm a movie buff, so I was a little taken aback that I had never heard of this movie, but. Anyway,
so my friend Steve, who I've talked about a couple times, he was the one who introduced me to Akira Kurosawa. So he was, he knew that I liked Star Wars. So he's like, watch Enchanted Fortress. He's like, also watch, the Samurai trilogy of Kurosawa. So he's like, watch Seven Samurai. And then he listed off a bunch of movies that, stemmed from the Seven Samurai, one of them being Magnificent Seven, and one of them being Battle Beyond the Stars. So I've also heard about it, but I've not seen it until this time. And I wish I watched it when I was younger.
Yeah, same here. As you said, this is a post Star Wars kind of film, and post Star Wars, there was a lot of people trying to cash in on Star Wars popularity. Roger Corman never missed an opportunity in his life to cash in on something. The guy has produced and directed hundreds and hundreds of films and is still alive today. Yeah. He actually just turned 94 as of the date that we're shooting this episode. Yeah, he's still around. But it is Magnificent Seven in space, as you said. I was just a few movies that I was going to mention that came out right on the cusp or right on the heels of Star Wars. You had the Black Hole, Disney's Black Hole came out in 1979. The Buck Rogers TV show came out. Star Crash, which was an Italian kind of Star Wars film. Alien, although I don't necessarily count that. That's a very serious film. I wouldn't compare it to Star Wars, but it is a science fiction film in space. A weird movie with Dorothy Stratton, the Playboy playmate Dorothy Stratton, Galaxina, which I've never seen. Even James Bond went to space in 1979 in Moonraker. Yep. But in 1980, Corman decides he wants to make his own kind of version of Star Wars. He hires John Sayles to write this film. John Sayles had written Piranha for him previously. Yes, that John Sayles. We'll get into him in a minute. Jimmy Murakami was the director. He was apparently an animator. After he would do this film, he would go on to do Heavy Metal, the animated film Heavy Metal, and another very depressing animated film called When the Wind Blows, about nuclear war.
Interesting.
So, as we said, this is yet another spin on Magnificent Seven. It's Magnificent Seven in space, and it has a pretty similar plot to the other Magnificent Seven films or Seven Samurai. Basically, you've got Richard Thomas is the main character. He plays Shad, but he was mostly known to audiences at this point as John Boy from the Waltons TV series from the 1970s. And the Waltons was still going on while he made Battle Beyond the Stars. I always want to say Battle of the Network Stars because that was another TV show where you had stars from ABC, NBC, and CBS competing in games on TV. Yeah, it was fun. 70s was a great time, really well, and the 80s. Battle of the Network Stars. Anyway, so John Boy is Shad, and John Saxon playing Sardo Sorry, not Sardo. Sador. Sador comes to John Boy's planet. I'm going to refer to him as John Boy the whole episode because I like saying John Boy.
Ari or something like that's the name of it.
Well, the planet is Akir.
Akir,
because the people are Akira, which is a nod to Akira Kurosawa.
Yeah.
Obviously, Sador comes. He says, "Hey, I've got some friggin' ray gun or something. I don't know what he says. He's got something, a stellar converter. He's going to destroy their planet after 7 cycles or 7 risings." So he's basically, I think, 7 days. He's going to come back 7 days, like the ring.
The ring.
Yeah. No, he's going to come back in 7 days and destroy their planet, and they're powerless to resist him. So John Boy decides, hey, I'm going to go out into the galaxy, and I'm going to recruit people to come and help us defend our planet. He goes out, and he finds the Magnificent Seven, or whatever you want to call it, the Cosmic Seven, to come back and defend their planet. And, of course, you have the big fight at the end of the movie.
And one of them is Robert Vaughn. Again,
one of them is Robert Vaughn.
You can't say no to a Magnificent Seven movie.
Right. He was also in the Magnificent Seven, and he plays a very similar character. He's wanted, and his name is Gelt in this movie. I don't even remember what his name is in Magnificent Seven. But he and George Papard were both not A-list actors. They had been maybe A-list actors before this. Both of their careers were a little on the decline, which is why they said, okay, we'll do a Roger Corman New World Pictures movie. And honestly, I think a lot of so the budget for this was apparently $2 million, and a lot of the money went to them for their acting. Yeah, they demanded high salaries.
It's interesting because, like, the movie special effects, like, most of it looks pretty good. Like, I feel like, I feel like that money was well spent. Like they didn't, it wasn't frivolous. I guess what I'm trying to say is you could see it on the screen. Like it looked like they were spending it on the right things, and the special effects looked, for a movie from the 80s, a lot of it still looked pretty good.
Well, and speaking of the special effects, one of the guys behind the scenes was Mr. James Cameron. Yep. He worked with the special effects. He did some of the models and stuff. I think he came up with a model for the ship, which, what does that ship look like to you?
Well, I know what it's supposed to look like. It looks, you know what it looks like? I pulled this up. There's a Star Wars creature from A New Hope that it looks exactly like. Okay. But yeah, he based it off the female anatomy, so it looks like the woman's reproductive system with boobs on the bottom.
It's very odd.
It's very. It's not.
It's very odd looking.
What's the word? It's very apparent. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not subtle. It's not subtle.
It's not subtle at all.
You're right. All right, so we're kind of jumping around here. I guess we should say, what did you feel about the movie? So neither one of us have seen it. What did you feel about it overall? I agree with you. I didn't have a problem with the special effects. I mean, they're 1980s special effects, lasers and stuff. That's fine.
They look good. I think if I saw this movie when I was a child, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But there's a lot of campiness to it that I wasn't on board for, and I tried to be, but it just was weird and silly and just not a fun kind of way. I felt like the first hour and a half of it took forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. How'd you feel?
Same. I wish I would have been with my friends back in the late 90s saying, yeah, I really love that movie. Yeah. But instead, I'd never heard of it and never saw it as a kid. I feel like I would have had a lot more fun with it as a kid. I just found it to be really boring. Yeah. Honestly, it just didn't do much for me. It didn't move well at all. It was not structured very well.
And I think it was trying to borrow a lot from the Magnificent Seven. Mm-hmm. But the most interesting part of the movie are the last 20 minutes. Yeah. And it's not even like the space battles, because that stuff is just kind of boring, but it's when they're actually on the planet shooting things. Like that for me was the most interesting part. And, like I had no sense of, like, I don't want to say stakes, because I kind of knew what was going on, but I didn't care about what happened to the characters during the space battles. Yeah. And it just felt so removed during that space battle stuff that I didn't really care what happened to the ships or what ship's getting destroyed or who's winning on who, all that kind of stuff. And the only time it got more interesting is when you actually can see physical people, like, shooting at each other. And then I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm actually beginning to, like, have an emotional connection or worry about what's going to happen.
I agree 100%. I got tired of seeing the space battle. Honestly, they reused some of the same shots, a lot of the same shots over and over. And I got tired of keeping up with who's shooting who and who's shooting. And it was that deviation from that when they actually were on the ground shooting people and fighting down there that actually was interesting to me. I found a lot of it, a lot of the rest of it very tedious. And honestly, I was bored silly during this movie. Well, I was waiting for it to end.
I think Sador's men can actually shoot better than stormtroopers because they take out a few. Of those people.
They do kill a few people. That's true. That's true.
I'm with you. I was having trouble. I feel like the story doesn't make a lot of sense because there was things happening on the screen. And I had no idea what was going on, and like things would be happening or a new scene would happen, and I'm just like, okay, what did that last scene do? Like, I had a hard time like getting my mind around like the flow and what we're actually trying to tell. Like,
I felt that it didn't flow. It didn't flow very well. And honestly, I don't think it helps that I think John Boy is very weak and uncharismatic. Oh my God. And I know you said his mole distracted you.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say that on the podcast.
Richard Thomas is famous. He has a pretty distinctive mole.
And he's in the It miniseries. This is where I know him from.
He's in the Losers Club.
But his character is just nebbish and weak and just whiny. He is everything that Chico is in The Magnificent Seven. He's just grating the whole time. And you have this...
Give me Mark Hamill any day over him.
Yeah. At least Mark Hamill like rises to the occasion, right? Like he it's the hero's journey, right? So like he dismisses the call, but then eventually he kind of rises to it and stuff like that, and it's forever changed. This guy never rises to it.
Yeah, he's just weak and whiny.
And doesn't help that he has like this computer that's sassing him the whole time. and like call him
Nell or whatever.
Nell, like calling him names and telling him like he's doing it wrong. Like how can you root for a character when the whole time this computer's just like negging him and telling him like he's a piece of shit, basically, right? Like it's hard to root for this guy. And then he picks up that one girl from her dad who wants like to court him, right? Get him to hook up. Weird. And then she's going to join him on the journey.
He's like a trash can. He's just a head surrounded by like a barrel.
And they have like androids. And she's like, oh, you're warm. Like, it's so weird.
Yeah.
But then she's going to join him, but she doesn't get on his ship. She gets on some other ship, I guess, because she's going to go
she comes behind,
recruit somebody else. And then she gets attacked by like some space gas that the cowboy, is it the cowboy that doesn't shoot it or...
No, it's the lizard guy.
The lizard guy shoots it.
The lizard guy shoots it off of her.
Like, it's just so random and just so weird. And I'm just like I'm trying to like juggle all these like balls in my head trying to understand what's going on. And I think it was just frivolous because I don't think John Sayles cared. Or maybe the script had a lot going on and then in editing they kind of effed it up.
Yeah, probably that. I mean? Or maybe John Sayles just wrote to what he felt like Roger Corman's audiences would expect. Yeah. Because, so John Sayles, we mentioned him earlier. He's the Mr. Independent filmmaker. He's been operating kind of outside the Hollywood studio system his whole career, basically. He's writes his own movies. He directs his own movies. And I'm quite frankly, I'm a fan of a lot of the movies that I've seen of his. He's had an interesting career. But, yes, he started off doing... schlock like this, I guess.
The great thing about Roger Corman, and you kind of said this, is he actually started a lot of people's career. His movies may or may not be prolific on, coming back from the past or not being part of it when they were coming out. I don't feel like I can accurately say what impact his movie has, but what can very well be said and proven is that how many famous directors and famous, writers and people have gotten their starts on Roger Corman produced movies.
Yeah, he's definitely launched a lot of careers. Absolutely, he's very important. I feel like to the history of cinema.
For sure.
No matter what you think about the quality of the films that he has produced and directed, which admittedly there's been a lot of crap in there, but there's a lot of stuff in there that are absolute cult classics and whatnot. So,
but yeah, John Boy Chad was just horrible. It was just so bad.
John Boy Shad, yeah.
I wanted to call out the space xylophone that they're using to orient the planet or orient the force fields.
Yeah, I don't know if there was like a Close Encounters influence or what.
Weird. Or from the movie we watched, the John Carpenter movie. Because remember, he has his own little xylophone Dark Star.
Or Dark Star, yeah. Sorry, not Starman. Yeah, Dark
so
Star.
Maybe the 80s, 70s, like xylophones were like a thing.
They were in the 70s.
Carillons, and people just wanted to play them.
Well, I don't know. I'd completely forgotten. I just watched this last night for crying out loud. I already forgot that part. I was so bored.
The cowboy guy was interesting. There's some aspects of it I like, some aspects I didn't like.
To me, he's the best thing in the movie. Yeah. I like George Papard.
And I think he's supposed to be the Steve McQueen character, right? Because that's the other thing. I kept on trying to pair him up with.
Honestly, I wasn't even trying to figure out who was who, but yeah,
he would be a cross between
he's the
Brenner
coolest person in the movie. So you could stick him, I think, with Steve McQueen or Yul Brynner either way. But yeah.
And then we had Gord, the lizard guy, Goron. Was it what they call him?
I have no idea what his name is.
I was trying to figure out what they call in Star Trek, that creature.
Yeah.
Oh, that
William Shatner fights.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's called Goron.
I don't know.
But I think the makeup looked good on him. Like, he looked interesting. Mm-hmm. The weird thing, the interesting thing is, and this is something else I'm on two minds, and then we'll jump into, you're going to say about Sybil.
Sybil Dan, the Valkyrie girl. Yeah.
But it felt like it didn't feel like there's a lot of cohesiveness in the look of the spaceships or in the look of the characters and all that kind of stuff. It just felt like, they were cutouts from a bunch of different sources and kind of pasted together, right? It almost felt like a collage.
And knowing Roger Corman, it probably was.
Yeah. So to me, like, part of me likes that because it feels like, oh yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like galaxies, of course, things are going to be different. And the way they build one spaceship here is going to look like boobs, and the way they build this spaceship over here is going to look like a robot frog, like that kind of makes sense, like intellectually, and I can admire that. But as a viewer, there probably needs to be some kind of cohesiveness between the visual styles of this stuff, because it just feels ADD, and like I said, it feels like a jumble of things in a collage, and I wish there was more of a visual style between things, because you have like the bad guy who has like a smear on his face, and I guess he has a robot arm because he's like has this Napoleon thing going on, and then they replace his arm, and then he has a bunch of dudes that look kind of like Klingons but aren't, but they have like a scar here.
Okay, so I felt like they watched Star Wars, and the guy that threatens Luke in the Mos Eisley Cantina, that's like, I don't like you either. That's got kind of the melty face.
I
feel like those guys, they're like, we want that as the makeup for these guys, because they all look like that to me.
Yeah, it's like it's just weird. Yeah, they look. His name like not Dr. Zayas.
I have no idea what his name is.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just so weird. So you have those guys, and then you have like this, it just felt like a whole mishmash of different things. Like you would imagine, like when I look at him, I would imagine like the leader would be of the same race as his kind of cronies, right? Because like if you think about like Star Trek 3,
he's such an ass.
Christopher Lloyd is like a Klingon, and he's commanding a fleet of Klingons. So you would think I would think that they'd be the same race. And then you have those guys with like the painted eye on their face, who one of them looks like Mel Brooks. I know it's not Mel Brooks, but the whole time he just looks like Mel Brooks's like little, what movie is it where he plays like an elvish kind of character, like almost a Yoda? He plays like a Yoda character. It's in Spaceballs, probably.
It's in Spaceballs, yeah.
He looks almost Yoda, like a white kind of Yoda-ish character, which is very confusing. And they have like a Borg hive mind kind of thing.
Yeah, I actually did kind of find that interesting, where they try and attach the arm to John Saxon, and then
they're
they try
all
and kill
like
him.
This,
because they can control what one feels, they all feel. So when they eat a hot dog in the movie, one of them is actually eating the hot dog, and the other ones are all chewing, even though they never put anything
in their mouth. It's a veggie dog too, by the way, not a hot dog.
Oh, okay, yeah, a veggie dog. But
and it just felt like I said, there's just no. Then you have those little guys that communicate via heat. Like, it just felt like they threw everything in the kitchen sink at this. Yeah, and like you said, it's probably Roger Corman. But it just felt, I wish there was some cohesiveness. The Valkyrie lady was just so random, and her outfit was, like, distracting. Like, not in a good way either. It was just kind of like, what is she wearing? Why is she wearing that?
The Valkyrie, or Valkyrie as she pronounces it, is played by Sybil Danning. And she, along with John Saxon, who plays Sador with the villain with the thing over his eye, neither one of them met a genre film that they could say no to, because both of them are in a lot of, let's face it, just crap from the 70s, 80s. John Saxon is still alive today. Well, Sybil Danning's still alive today, but John Saxon is pretty darn old. He's 80-something, I believe. He's still alive today. He's not really working as much now, but his career, especially 70s and 80s and 90s, are a lot of these kind of genre schlock films. Like, some of them are actually pretty good, but he, like Nicolas Cage, he was a Nicolas Cage of that era. He didn't say no to squat. He was like, I'll do it. I'll do it.
But yeah, it was so like her, and Kirby was looking up her costume, and apparently when it aired on ABC, they blurred out
I can
the
see
whole.
it. I can see it.
It doesn't leave anything to the imagination.
No, it does not. It does not. And from what I understood, on set, her costume kept slipping and revealing a little too much. So
when she's in her spaceship, she's just like laying down.
I know,
the
it's a weird
like
way.
Weird. The ankle's like right here.
Fly a spaceship.
It was just so random. Like that's the word for it. So like the movie just felt random.
Yeah. Well, did you recognize? So the Nestor is the hive mind. It's Nestors is what they're called or whatever. But did you recognize the main one is Dr. Silberman from the Terminator movies, the guy that thinks Sarah Connor's crazy, her psychiatrist?
No,
that keeps her locked up. Because of course he has white face paint on and a cowl and a third eye.
Do you think it was a cowl? Because I think it was supposed to be their bald.
Oh,
and I think it was just really bad
just
makeup.
Like maybe.
I think like the spirit gum kept on like peeling off or whatever.
But I assume because James Cameron was on the set and he and Earl Bowen and apparently Bill Paxton was a carpenter on set at the time, and of course he would go on to work with James Cameron in several movies. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I was going to say George Peppard and Robert Vaughn, again, their careers had kind of hit a skid before this movie, and George Peppard, honestly, it's documented fact. He says that he was kind of an alcoholic in the 1970s, and he apparently quit a couple of years before this movie, but he wasn't exactly able to be choosy at this point in time. So he's just like, yeah, I'll play the space cowboy. But again, he's probably my favorite thing in the movie.
He's definitely the standout of the movie.
He's more interesting than the other characters.
I
love his belt.
Yeah, with the
dispense scotch and ice cubes, and I love that.
Yeah,
it's scotch and water or whatever.
Yeah, I know. Why don't we have that these days?
I don't know.
Yeah, just instead of like a belt that you can disperse coins from, he just like pours his own cocktail and stuff like that, just drinks.
I don't know.
And he smokes, and he has there's a no smoking added here. He's like, yeah, it's a bad habit, but I do it anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a weird movie. Again, it's one of those movies that's probably fun and interesting when you're younger and you're just like, you know what I mean? Like when you look at it with like an adult or analytical mind, it's just kind of like.
And I'm sure that's why my friends that were mentioning it back in the day, they had all seen it as kids, and they probably had seen it repeatedly and loved it, along with Star Wars and some of the other kind of Star Wars ripoffs of the early '80s and late '70s. So, but unfortunately, I missed out on this. I saw some of the other Star Wars kind of rip. I mean, I saw Black Hole, although apparently Black Hole was in production before Star Wars even came out. But since it came out afterwards, everybody's like, you copied Star Wars or whatever. But some of the other kind of early 80s, like Star Hunter, I think is one, and Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Sin. Although that may be like a ripoff of Mad Max. I think I might be. Because there's a lot of ripoffs of Mad Max and Road Warrior after that movie came out. There's a ton of those. But anywho, if we just seen this movie as kids.
Yeah, I'd probably like it.
Yeah.
Drinking our Yoo-hoo or whatever, chocolate milk. Is there anything you want to add about Battle Beyond the Stars?
I was only going to mention we've kind of gone through the cast. George Peppard, who played Cowboy, as we have been repeatedly mentioning. He did get a lift and a boost in his career because shortly after this he would do the A-Team television series where he would play Hannibal Smith, and he was joined in the 5th and final season by none other than Robert Vaughn. Although Robert Vaughn was probably like, hey, I was told this was going to be a Magnificent Seven series, and it's not. So John Boy, as you mentioned, did the first miniseries, obviously not the new movies that have come out in the last few years, but the miniseries with Tim Curry as Pennywise the Clown. Most recently, I saw him in the television show The Americans, and he's actually pretty good in that.
Does he still have his mole?
I think he still does. I mean, it's his trademark.
Signature look.
So George Papard, John Saxon, we mentioned him. Earl Bowen went on to play Dr. Silverman in the Terminator films. So when we were talking about Magnificent Seven, I mentioned the Once Upon a Time trilogy. Charles Bronson is in the first Once Upon a Time in the West, the first movie in that trilogy. James Coburn is in Duck You Sucker. It's also known as A Fistful of Dynamite. I didn't mention that, but it goes by two different titles. He's in the second movie in that trilogy. And we've got another connection to that trilogy. Darlene Flugel, who plays the love interest of John Boy in this movie, she would do the third movie in that trilogy, Once Upon a Time in America, which came out in '84. She also did a few other things like Lock Up with Sylvester Stallone. She's in Pet Sematary 2, which sucks. But anyway, and then looking at the Rotten Tomatoes score for this, 45% fresh, not even fresh, really. Rotten, I guess, and 42% audience score. So it's probably about right.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's not a fun movie. There's a lot better Star Wars knockoffs or science fiction films that are cheap that you could watch. I feel like that are better than this.
I would say watch the last 30 minutes of this movie.
Yeah, just skip to that.
Yeah, because
you're familiar with the Magnificent Seven storyline.
He's going out, he's meeting people. Read the IMDb or read the Wikipedia entry if you want to know. But he goes out, grabs people, then they come back to save the planet, and then watch that part. And yeah, it shows how not I want to say how difficult, but it shows you it does take talent to even make kind of like a space opera kind of movie. Because George Lucas with the Star Wars movies, the space battles were interesting, the character's journey was interesting, all that stuff, and he did borrow from a lot of sources to build that, but so did Battle Beyond the Stars, right? Yeah. Not Battle of the Stars.
Not Battle of the Network Stars.
You got me in my head with that. So it shows that it does actually take some kind of talent to kind of build this together. You just can't take all these things and jumble them together and out a good thing comes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Expect it to work. All right, so now's the time we move on to our viewer question.
So our viewer question is also very on topic today, and is, what's your favorite movie remake? So like we said, Battle Beyond the Stars, Magnificent Seven, they're all remakes or retellings of the Seven Samurai. So Andy, what is your favorite remake?
All right, so we were kind of looking through lists of remake, which there's a lot of remakes out there, and a lot of ones that you forget about, especially, back in the early days of Hollywood, films were getting, nowadays we complain about remakes and go, where are they doing another Spider-Man or whatever? They just did one 5 years ago. But back in the early days of Hollywood, like the 30s and the 40s, they would remake a movie the very next year. That was how low they ran on story ideas. It seriously was that bad or good, depending on what your tolerance for remakes.
And there's actually a lot of good movies that are remakes.
Sure.
Like the list we were looking through, I was surprised on how many of them were actually good.
Yeah. We might have settled on the same thing, but before I give my pick, I will mention a few.
We can go back and forth because I got a couple too.
I think we both agree the Dawn of the Dead remake.
Yes.
That Rob Schneider is what I was about to say. Zack Snyder.
That would be an entirely different movie.
You can do it. No, not Rob Schneider, but Zack Snyder.
James Gunn written, Zack Snyder directed.
Yeah, I thought that was excellent, and I always say this. I have to say this. I'm a huge fan of the original Dawn of the Dead. So when the remake came out, I was very, very angry, and then I saw it, and I was like, wow, they did a good job with it.
Really good job.
What would be another good example of?
So, a recent movie that came out was A Star Is Born. Yeah. So they've remade that, I think, 3 or 4 times. 3 times. I think there's 4 of them. And the Bradley Cooper version of it, I think, was very good. It was my first entry in The Star Is Born. Yeah. But I thought it was a really well done movie.
Yeah. I haven't seen there's a 70s one with Chris Christopherson, and I think it's the only one I haven't seen. Miller. The one that is probably the most well-known or most critically favored is the Judy Garland, James Mason one from the 50s. But yeah, no, I agree. I liked the Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga version as well. Another kind of recent remake that the original movie I'm a huge fan of. I thought the RoboCop remake was pretty good.
Interesting.
The 2014 remake.
I did not. But my hot take is I actually like the Total Recall remake. I don't think it's better than the Verhoeven movie, but I actually like it with Kate Beckinsale, Colin Farrell,
yeah,
and Jessica Biel.
That one has completely left my mind. I don't remember hating it, but I don't really remember being really, really overjoyed about it.
I like it. I don't. To me, they're two different movies, even though they're from the same source, I guess, or they, one's a remake of the other one. But I actually kind of like the remake of Total Recall.
A lot of remakes that have come out, I would say maybe recently, or let's just say in the last 20 years, I have not seen because I was a big fan of the original film. There's been 2 Black Christmas remakes over the last 20 years. I've avoided both of them. A, because I heard they sucked. And I love the original Black Christmas from the 1970s. I'll jump way back, though, and say a movie that kind of sprang to mind for me is His Girl Friday with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell. That's a remake of a movie called The Front Page. Front Page is good, but His Girl Friday is a classic. It just blows it out of the water.
I did not know that was a remake.
Yeah.
I'm saying more modern. The Departed. We talked about that. It's a remake of I think it's a Korean movie, Infernal Affairs. Pretty good Scorsese movie. I think it won Academy Awards, so.
Yeah, it was Best Picture of that year. I don't know what else it won, but I remember it won that. Yeah, I like Departed. I saw Infernal Affairs, but don't remember a whole lot.
I've yet to see Infernal Affairs. I own it, but it's not one that...
I actually saw that first. I had a buddy that was like, oh, you got to watch this movie. And so I watched it, and I remember liking it, and then The Departed came out a few years later, and I liked The Departed. Yeah, it's a good movie. So there's been 2 remakes of King Kong. King Kong 1933 is an absolute stone cold classic. Love it. Love the practical effects in it. The 1976 version I actually like, where he climbs the World Trade Center instead of the Empire State Building. He's got Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange. Most people think it sucks, but I like it. I didn't care for the Peter Jackson 2005 tremendously long remake of King Kong.
Yeah,
but 1976 one, not too bad.
I have only seen the Peter Jackson King Kong. So I've not seen the 1933 one. I've not seen the 70s one. Yeah. We should do the 2 King Kongs, the 70s and the 33.
Let's do it.
Ocean's 11, the remake of the Rat Pack.
Oh, that's a great. I'm glad you brought that up.
George Clooney, great movie.
Yeah, and the original one I don't like. Yeah, honestly. The one with the actual Rat Pack, who you'd think would be an awesome movie, I actually don't care for it.
Yeah, the other Ocean's movies, take it or leave it, but Ocean's 11 is a great movie. It's magic.
It's awesome. I don't have any other honorable mentions. Those are the only ones that I hastily put together.
I got 2, my 2 top ones. Okay. Let's say what yours is, and then.
All right. So we talked about John Carpenter when we did Starman and when we did Dark Star. And interestingly, John Carpenter has made. He's made remakes, and then several of his movies have been themselves remade, like Assault on Precinct 13, which I love the original. I've never seen the remake. The Fog was remade, and I actually saw both of those. I prefer John Carpenter's original.
And the movie you're going to say got remade?
The movie that is my pick is a remake of a 1950s film, and it is, of course, The Thing. I think we gushed about it a lot when we were talking about John Carpenter before. But I just can't. I don't think it can be overstated how awesome The Thing from 1982 is. It's amazing. If you haven't seen it, you must. Well, if you haven't seen it and you can take some pretty gory special effects, watch it. If you have a weak stomach, you might want to avoid it. But otherwise, see it.
But also, it had a reboot.
Yeah,
which I think is still good.
It is good.
I don't think enough people give it credit, but I don't. It's hard to hold a candle to The Thing, but I think it is good.
I don't consider it necessarily a remake or reboot because isn't it more of a prequel? Because it's the events kind of leading up to.
But it's kind of a remake. I don't know. Yeah, that's the same
title. I guess I view it more as a prequel. Yeah. So that's why I didn't consider it, but I agree with you. I think it's pretty good. It's pretty darn good.
So I'm going to throw a curveball.
All right.
My pick is The Fly, Cronenberg. Love David Cronenberg. Steve, who I've mentioned numerous times through these episodes, has introduced me to Cronenberg, and Jeff Goldblum's Brindlefly, In the Fly. It's a remake of, I forgot the movie it was a remake. I think it's a remake of The Fly
with Vincent Price.
Yeah. But the gory special, again, talking about uber gory, David Cronenberg known for his body horror, right? Because you have like Videodrome, you have the Brood, you know, all these kind of like body horror movies, and then you have the pinnacle of which I would call The Fly with Jeff Goldblum. Amazing movie.
Yeah, Dave Cronenberg could make a children's movie and it would still find some way to have gore in it. Yeah.
And his son is also carrying that mantle and is making a bunch of very gory movies and or very like horror kind of movies.
Interesting.
But Jeff Goldblum is just excellent in there. He was dating was it Gina Davis at the time, and she's also in it. He has like this monologue he gives like, you know, 3/4 of the way through the movie, which is moving and awesome. And, you know, The Fly is. I
need to see it again. Not that I didn't like it or anything like that before. I just don't remember a lot about it. I remember it being very disgusting in the teleportation machines. But I want to watch. I actually want to watch the Vincent Price one and watch the Jeff Goldblum one again.
Well, I haven't seen the Vincent Price one, so maybe that can be another thing we do.
I just thought of one since you mentioned Jeff Goldblum. Yeah. That's not your number one pick, right? That's just
that's what I'm gonna choose. That's it. It's hard between The Thing and The Fly. I mean, it depends on what day, but you know, I think today it's The Fly.
So I'm not changing my answer. The Thing is definitely still number one, but because you mentioned Jeff Goldblum, I was going to mention the Invasion of the Body Snatchers movies. Oh. The first movie is fantastic, but the 1970s one with Donald Sutherland and Jeff Goldblum is really, really awesome. And actually, the one that came out in the 90s is actually pretty darn good as well with Gabrielle Anwar. And then they came out with one with Daniel Craig and Nicole Kidman, which sucks. So the most recent kind of iteration of Invasion of the Body Snatchers skip, but I would say the other ones are good, especially. And the Donald Sutherland one, again, it's an update and it's a lot more gory and kind of scary than the original film, which was more of a subtext of McCarthyism and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's that 1978 remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers is awesome as well.
I don't know if I've seen those.
I think they're both on your list.
All right.
Yeah. So we'll fix that.
All right. So that was not Battle Beyond the Network Stars, but Battle Beyond the Stars. And that was our
John Boy in Space. Yeah.
So, and that was our favorite remakes. If you have a favorite remake, or if you have one that we've missed and that you want to let us know about, shoot us an email, realshame@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram @realshame. And then what was I going to say?
We're going to talk about another movie next time.
Stay tuned, and next time we'll talk about another movie. And if you have a movie you like us to see a review, also shoot us an email @realshame.com. Realshame.com? Realshame@gmail.com. One of those things will work. All right. We'll see you next time, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye.